All right, so welcome back, grade 10s, and we are going to continue our look at the corporation, and here we go. I call that guy Lefty. So the whole point in the background, DuPont has a fungicide, and because of an externality of that fungicide, a child is born without eyes. So there's layers to this documentary. Sometimes you have to look at the words that are happening. So DuPont is a major transnational corporation, and they make many products, but one of them is a fungicide. And this mother was exposed to the fungicide while she was pregnant, and it altered her child to the point that he's born without eyes. And DuPont takes no responsibility for their actions. What kind of person takes no responsibility for their actions? A? Psychopath, exactly. Psychopath, a narcissist, President Trump, these are types of people that don't take responsibility for their actions. And psychopathy is a part of that mirror, right? This essay that we're looking at is really a psychological essay. It's amazing. It's an essay that there's so much you can do with it. And we're looking at the nature of mankind, and to what extent has globalization shown that we are psychopaths? Well, let's look at DuPont. Evidence, DuPont creates a fungicide, there's an externality, causes a child to be born without eyes, and DuPont says, well, we're not responsible. That's psychopathy. So the argument could be that globalization has revealed the psychopathic nature of mankind. That's your argument. And then your supporting evidence is this case study about DuPont. But I'd like to see in your essays more argumentation. So the thesis statement's an argument, and you guys are getting really, your thesis statement creation is getting better. And then at the topic of each paragraph should be argumentation. But even within the paragraph, we can put in arguments like this. So definitely something to look forward to. And there is the lad.
Industry has known about this, at least most industries have known about this, and have attempted to trivialize these risks. If I take a gun and shoot you, that's criminal. If I expose you to some chemicals which knowingly are going to kill you, what difference is there? The difference is that it takes longer to kill you.
So sometimes, again, stuff that's happening in the background is meaningful. So there's that checklist, because the whole documentary, they're pretending to be psychiatrists and psychologists, and they're looking at the character of corporations and therefore the mankind, and they're saying that there's a reckless disregard for the well-being of others. And that language that was in the background, that reckless disregard for the well-being of others, that's psychopathy. So it's that kind of stuff that it's like, oh man, that there's an argument there for an essay. That within the parameters of globalization, we can see that individuals have a reckless disregard for the well-being of others. That's an argument. And because of it, we need to be cautious when we globalize. So, what are they doing? They're spraying, and they're using carcinogenic chemicals to spray so they can cut down on weeds and they can cut down on insects and things like that. So they're using a carcinogenic thing. That's why this guy has, that safety suit on. But a couple minutes later, some office staff come out and they have their lunch there. They don't know that it's been sprayed, that there's some carcinogenic residue left on the rock. So as an externality, while they're eating their peanut butter sandwich, because that's all they have, while they're eating their peanut butter sandwich for lunch, they're also getting some carcinogenic substances on their fingertips, and they start consuming that. So there's a lot of hidden things happening in the global village because we're so connected. There's things happening that are affecting us that we're unaware of.
We are now in the midst of a major cancer epidemic, and I have no doubt, and I have documented the basis for this, that industry is largely responsible for this overwhelming epidemic of cancer in which 1 in every 2 men get cancer in their lifetimes, and 1 in every 3 women get cancer in their lifetimes.
So, other ways to show psychopathy. Well, due to corporate activities, we see habitat destruction. So I'm picking up language. I often talk about habitat destruction, just the term, because the term itself is very, very precise and concise. You know, the terms habitat destruction, you don't really need to elaborate that much. We know what it means. It means that bears are eating, in garbage dumps because we have, deforested. We've logged their traditional ecosystem, their traditional habitat. Factory farming. So those little piggies don't get to move around because we need to maximize our profit. So in order to maximize our profit, we're going to farm animals in a environment where the animal cannot even stand much of the time. So another documentary called Food Incorporated talks about pastoral fantasies. You go to Walmart and you look at the case, and there's a nice picture of a family farm where your food came from. And this is a pastoral fantasy. They're selling you something that's not real. The reality is your food came from a farm like this, from a factory. It lived in its own waste. It never was able to stand because of how many other pigs or cows were around it. And that's a danger because consumers need to know where our food source is coming from.
Towards the end of 1989.
So now they're going to do a big extended case study into RBGH, RBST, or Posilac. And if you're a dairy farmer, maybe you know about these chemicals by Monsanto. Good news, Canadian dairy industry doesn't use them. So your milk up here is much safer than milk in the US. But when you go to the United States, or when you import milk from the US now, because the border is quite open for that, you could be drinking these chemicals. And you're going to see why you may not want to consume milk that has these chemicals in it. Because, you're going to see what happens to the cows.
A great box of documents arrived at my office without any indication where they came from. And I opened them and found in it a complete set of Monsanto files, particularly a set of files dealing with toxicological testing of cows who've been given RBGH.
BST, trade name Posilac, is being used in more than a quarter of the dairy herds in the United States, according to Monsanto. The milk has been drunk by a large portion of the American population, since the Food and Drug Administration declared it safe for both cows and humans 4 years ago.
And at that time, Monsanto was saying, there's no evidence whatsoever of any adverse effects, we don't use antibiotics, and this clearly showed that they had lied through their teeth. The files described areas of chronic inflammation in the heart, lung, kidney, spleen, also reproductive effects, also a whole series of other problems.
The most comprehensive independent assessment of the drug concludes that BST results in unnecessary pain, suffering, and distress for the cows.
So you might be sitting there saying, I don't care if my cow's happy, I just care if it tastes good. Oh wait, you'll see the rest of the story. So RBGH, RBST, Posilac, this is some evidence that people use a lot in their essays. This often is some of the key evidence to show the nature of corporations. And one of the points they're about to make is the world is awash in milk. We don't need more milk. Governments actually pay farmers to destroy milk because there's so much milk on the market that the price would collapse if we allowed all farmers to sell the milk they're producing. So Monsanto creates a product to sell, which is RBGH, a product to enable us to sell a product that we don't need, more milk. And the externality of this product that they've created, RBGH, is it creates mastitis in cows, which, okay, your cow is suffering, that's okay, but some of the pus that's created through that process leaks into the milk, so now you got pussy milk. And what's wrong with pussy milk? Well, there's a lot of high bacteria count in that pus. So why are you sick all the time? Well, it might be the milk. It might be the milk you're drinking. And it has been proven to be cancerous to cows. Is it cancerous to people? Well, Monsanto's not going to tell us that. Because this is a product that they're betting hundreds of millions of dollars on. They've taken the time to create it and advertise it. Now they need to make the money from it because their primary concern is profit. So if, as we're going to see eventually, if some reporters get the story and they're like, hey, you know what, we want to tell the world that this milk is unsafe, they're going to want to bribe the reporters to keep the story silent because profit is ahead of the common good. It's in the common good to tell people that their milk they're drinking is full of pus that is going to cause infections and maybe cancer. But they don't care about the common good because corporations have evolved, that's funny, right? Because it usually means getting better. Just like this active presenter program, maybe updates aren't always better. So instead of getting better, now they're just focused on profit. So if, as an externality of them generating profit, people get cancer, that's acceptable collateral damage. As long as they can minimize the blowback to them. I just wanted to use some military terms there.
This is not acceptable for a drug designed simply to increase milk production.
It is a silly product. We have the industrial world is awash in milk. We're overproducing milk. We actually have governments around the world who pay farmers not to produce milk. So the first product Monsanto comes up with is a product that produces more of what we don't need.
Of course, you'll want to inject Posilac to every eligible cow, as each cow not treated is a lost income opportunity.
But the problem was that use of the artificial hormone caused all kinds of problems for the cows. It caused something called mastitis, which is a very painful infection of the udders. When you milk the cow, if the cow has bad mastitis, some of the, and I don't know how to say this in a, I hope people aren't watching at dinner time, but the pus from the infection of the udders ends up in the milk, and the somatic cell count, they call it, the bacteria count inside your milk goes up.
There's a cost to the cows. The cows get sicker when they're injected with RBGH. They're injected with antibiotics. We know that people are consuming antibiotics through their food, and we know that that's contributing to antibiotic-resistant bacteria and diseases. And we know we're at a crisis when somebody can go into a hospital and get a staph infection and it can't be cured and they die. That's a crisis.
Bad for the cow, bad for the farmer, bad potentially for the consumer. The jury is out. We see a lot of conflicting evidence about potential health risks. And of course, as a consumer, my belief is, why should I take any risk?
Factory farm cows have not been the only victims of Monsanto products. Large areas of Vietnam were deforested by the U.S. military using Monsanto's Agent Orange. The toxic herbicide reportedly caused over 50,000 birth defects, as well as hundreds of thousands of cancers in Vietnamese civilians and soldiers, and in former American troops serving in Southeast Asia. Unlike the Vietnamese victims, U.S. Vietnam veterans exposed to Agent Orange were able to sue Monsanto for causing their illnesses. Monsanto settled out of court, paying $80 million in damages, but it never admitted guilt.
Sleeping in a motel in Brewer, Maine one night, I woke up with terrible hay fever and my eyes were burning, and I looked out at the river and there were great mounds of white foam going right down the river. And the next morning I got up and I said, my God, what was that happening last night? He said, oh, that's just the river. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, look, every night the paper companies send us stuff down the river. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, don't you understand? That's how we get rid of the effluent from the paper mills. Well, I knew at that time, I'd been in a business, I'd sold oil to the paper mills, I knew all the owners, I'd been in politics, I knew the people in the towns. I knew not one constituent of the paper mills wanted to have the river polluted. And yet here the river was being polluted. And it was more or less as if we created a doom machine. In our search for wealth and for prosperity, we created something that's going to destroy us.
So now they're going to talk about that doomsday stuff, right? A little bit.
The traders who are involved in the market are not guys with moral fiber when it comes to environmental conditions are going to be rattled at all. They're seeing dollars and they're making money. Brokers don't stay away from copper because it violates their religious beliefs or their environmental policies. No. When you think about it, but it's fleeting. It really is a fleeting moment. It's like, well, the town's being polluted down there in Peru, but hey, this guy needs to buy some copper. And getting paid a commission too. Our information that we receive does not include anything about the environmental conditions. Because until the environmental conditions become a commodity themselves or being traded, then obviously we will not have anything to do with that. It doesn't come into our psyche at all. You know, it's so far away and you hardly hear anything about it. I mean, keep in mind, there are things going on right in our backyards, for God's sake. We trade live hogs. There's so many pigs in the state of Carolina that is polluting the rivers, but how often do you find out about that?
At Multinational Monitor, we put together a list of the top corporate criminals of the 1990s. We went back and looked at all of the criminal fines that corporations had paid in the decade. Exxon pled guilty in connection to federal criminal charges with the Valdez spill and paid $125 million in criminal fines. General Electric was guilty of defrauding the federal government and paid $9.5 million in criminal fines. Chevron was guilty of environmental violations and paid $6.5 million. Mitsubishi was guilty of antitrust violations and paid $1.8 million. IBM was guilty of illegal exports and paid $8.5 million. Was guilty of environmental violations. Pfizer, the drug manufacturer, was guilty of antitrust violations and was guilty of food and drug regulatory violations. Sears was guilty of financial fraud. Blue Shield of Illinois. Unocal was guilty of fraud. Environmental portions of Georgia Korean Airlines taxes and paid finance and paid $225 million. LaRouche, guilty of an antitrust violation, paid $500 million in criminal fines.
So the point of that is just to show that they'll keep paying the fines, but they will not conform to social norms. They understand that they're breaking the law, but if they can break the law and make more profit than they would by not breaking the law, they'll continue to break the law. Guess who does that? A psychopath does that. So I'm going to pause the video there so that I can make multiple smaller videos and one big one in the hopes that makes sure it doesn't crash. I'll also give you a chance to get caught up for a second.